So if you're not sure how to do that, I got it covered. So thank you all so much for being here. We were off last week. I missed seeing everybody, so I'm so glad we're back. And especially thrilled, want to say a special thank you to Juan for introducing us to Ed. And for those of you that don't know Ed, it would be surprising if you didn't, but he's an acclaimed photojournalist who uses photography, filmmaking, and social media to explore geopolitical and social issues that define our times. He is also a dedicated educator and mentor to photographers. And I really want to emphasize that because so many photographers out in the world that are working don't have the generosity of spirit that Ed has to make sure that the next generation of photographers are being lifted up and celebrated and educated and mentored. And so we're so grateful to him for being here. If you don't know, he's covered topics as diverse as the impact of oil in Nigeria, the Protestant community in Northern Ireland, the lives of Jewish settlers in the West Bank. And he's going to be showing you especially this work on the impact of aging society through his groundbreaking project, Aging in America. He is a leading voice in the photojournalism world, and he frequently lectures on a wide range of topics for art institutions, universities, schools, and professional organizations. We are so thrilled to have you here. Thank you so much, Ed.
Thank you, Susan. Welcome, and Juan Diego for inviting me. So ready to go here? Hope everyone's doing well. Everyone's healthy and safe, and your loved ones are also safe. You know, I'm in Montclair, New Jersey, so about 12 miles west of New York City, and you know, we've made it through a really rough time. More than 12,000 people in the state have passed from the virus. So you know, we're starting to feel a little breathing room, but man, we all need to still be aware and be careful. So anyway, that's it. That's my fatherly or avuncular talk on that. But it is hard to escape that reality. And of course, then what's been happening since the George Floyd murder. Well, I hope this really is an inflection point and our society begins to change in the direction that it needs to in terms of racial justice. And so anyway, what I'm going to do is I've prepared a presentation where I'm going to share some work from as Susan alluded to, my project on aging in America. And then the rest of the work is going to be basically things I've made in the last 3 months since I was sort of forced off the road. I think March 7th was when I returned from my last trip. And normally I'm on the road 8 months out of the year. So this has been an interesting period. And I can't believe after decades of being away so much, I love being home all the time. So I'm a little scared what changes have happened to me. But anyway, it sure is nice to work every day, and then come home to my wife and my home instead of a lonely hotel room. But that's a whole nother conversation, which I'm happy to get into. You know, there is one thing I've come to understand about this kind of work, is that it is extremely lonely, and it takes a certain kind of crazy person or maniac to do this. So, all right, I'm going to share my screen, and hopefully this will all work here. All right, so hopefully you guys are all seeing the cover of my book, Aging in America. Are we good? All right, cool. This morning I had a presentation for 7 and we had huge issues. So although Susan explained to me why that might have been. So this project really emanated from after having spent years working abroad on diverse, geopolitical issues, where I really wanted to turn my camera on my own culture, my own society. And I decided that aging would be one of the great themes of my lifetime. And that I set out with my wife, Julie Winokur, who was then a writer. And then in the course of this project, we spent 8 years on it, went to 25 states. She also became a filmmaker during that time, and that's what she does now. So this was a real collaboration between us. And it was interesting because it was just at the point where we were also starting our family. We have 2 kids. They're 22 and 25 now. But um, as I've said before, there were days where I would be in working on this, helping to change the diaper of an 80-year-old, and then go home that night and change the diaper of a 1-year-old. It was a very enlightening period. But the goal of this project for us was to really create almost like a topography of what our society would look like or looks like as we grow old, because we're in the next sort of 10, 20 years, uh, and not just the United States, but most of the industrialized world, there will be more people over 60 than under 18 for the first time in human history. And so we did everything from, the Senior Olympics to this is a model in Manhattan, Gloria Barnes, who worked for the elite division of Ford, which is code for someone over 60. And it was amazing the things that we learned about about this country and the people. And one thing that it did was it absolved me of a sort of cynicism about America and American society, and made me realize, what an amazing place this is. Um, we went to Sturgis, South Dakota for the motorbike rally, and hung out with this group called Retreads, which is a motorcycle gang for people over 55, and they go all over the country, having to rallies and so forth. And this is an example of something that is maybe not unique to American culture, but certainly quite pervasive, which is, we're a we're a country of subcultures and sort of sub communities. We also spent a week on the road with the Senior Pro Rodeo Tour. These are all things that I never knew about. I never even thought about until we did the research and dove into this project. And we photographed a couple in their 80s getting married in Florida. One thing that was super helpful. Well, so many things were helpful about having Julie on board, but one of the things that she taught me about 2 or 3 years into this project was that we couldn't just photograph and document the end of life. We couldn't just show people deteriorating. The pictures that I would say are more dramatic visually, certainly, and certainly more dramatic in terms of the scenes that we would be in. But that, after a certain point, if that's all we did, who would want to look at this? And that's something that over the years I've learned, and more than ever now guides me in my choices of story ideas or projects, but also kind of how I approach them, which is that I want to have an impact, but I want to have a positive impact with my work. And I would say that one of the sort of baked in ills of photojournalism is that there's this kind of tendency to look for the worst things going on in the most the toughest places, and make the most dramatic images of that. And while there might be something sort of exciting about that, and it does render quite amazing images, in the end, where does it leave our viewers? And that's something that actually my kids taught me too over the years, when I would come back all excited and show them these really intense pictures, and then I'd realize like they didn't really want to look at them. And so while obviously I will continue, and we should all continue to have an unflinching eye and look at the ills and the problems of the world and of our societies, it's really important to do what I call like solutions journalism or restorative work, where I might shine a spotlight on a problem, but I'm also going to look for some element or some character in the story, some organization that is working to ameliorate or address that problem. And I see that certainly at this point as one of the key elements of the work I do, and how and why I approach the work I do. This is Ike. He's 100 years old, is in San Francisco. We were living in San Francisco when we worked on this project, and he benefited from this organization called ONLOK, ONLOK, which started in Chinatown in San Francisco, a very innovative, groundbreaking organization that was figuring out ways early on how to have our elders age in place so they could maintain an independent life. And whether it was and basically it was like cobbling together whatever family or friends that were around the elder, along with sort of professional health care that they would provide, whether it was a social worker, nurse, doctor, so that this guy Ike, who was 100 when I started to photograph him, lived in
Hey,
a
Ed.
yes.
Sorry, the images aren't changing.
Oh, that's okay. That's because
Okay.
my hands are asleep. I'm joking.
No, I just wanted to make sure in case you thought they were. Okay, thank you.
No. Anyway, so one of the hallmarks of this project also was frontline reporting. We were early in on this subject and this issue, and it's not a sexy issue. It's not an issue that's easy to get magazines then publications to publish. We were very fortunate that we were able. This was also at a time where the magazine world was much more vibrant and robust, and they had budgets, so we were able to get this work published around the world. I think one of the key takeaways that I got from this project was the greater need for caring for people. That how are we going to deal with the baby boom generation, which was 70 million, whatever we are now. I'm at the tail end of it. As this generation grows old, who is going to take care of us? And I wasn't thinking so much about myself, but so these are some of the takeaways that I had from working on this. This was an innovative project by the Veterans Administration in Washington, D.C., where they were working with, again, similar to the Unlock thing, home-based primary care. So this elder, this is his son leaving work in the middle of the day to wake his dad up, bathe him, diaper him, feed him, and then leave him, and knowing that a nurse from the VA would visit his dad later that afternoon.
Hey, Ed.
Yep.
We've only seen the cover so far.
Oh my God, are you
That's
serious?
what I was saying before. I'm so sorry. I could have been more specific. Right. Yeah, that's okay.
How did I do on visualizing the images that you
That was so good. So good.
Okay, so then again, what I've learned is you cannot do full screen. So what do you see now?
I see two elder people and a young woman in a crown, okay, like a miss.
Okay, so
yeah.
Wait, we're gonna go back. Whoa. Okay, everybody hold on. Okay. So here we go. This is Gloria Barnes. Okay.
My God, photographs.
You guys must have been wondering, like, what is up with this guy? Anyway, okay, this is the Senior Olympics. This was in Baton Rouge that year. We'll go quickly. The wow. Retreads, Motorcycle Club in Sturgis. The Senior Pro Rodeo.
Danny Lyon photo.
That's right. Thank you for speaking up, Susan. This is the couple in their 80s getting married in Florida. This is Ike, the gentleman I was mentioning, who was 100 years old when we worked on this. And, I went to the Democratic Convention, which was in LA. I think this was in 2000, because, of course, political engagement among our elders is generally among the highest of any age group. And then, again, the greater need for caring for people. This is in Mechanicsburg, Pennsylvania, where there was an innovative program in a assisted living community that would match the elders with, this is an Alzheimer's unit, with kids from a daycare center in the same facility. And this is the VA, this is in DC, the son taking care of his dad. And also, my God, the access we got, the people opening their lives to us to allow us to see things like this. And here we go. So this is the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation. I went there a number of times to develop a photo essay. And the way I approached this project was like in an episodic format, where we would find an idea. In some cases, maybe we would spend 5 hours on one story, and that was it. In other cases, we might spend 2 or 3 months or 6 months going back and forth to develop a story, because the idea was to then, as we finished each segment, we could distribute it through. Then I was not in 7, I sort of acted like my own little picture agency. Again, this is pre-digital, working in film, where I had relationships with probably 10 foreign sub-agents around the world, one in each country. So I would finish something, make God, it was funny. It's fun. It's weird to think about it. I'd make 10 sets of duplicate slides and then FedEx them out to my agents to sell around the world. This is also on the Pine Ridge Reservation. There's so much that we saw, as I said earlier, that this country is really incredible, and just so many people doing great things, but also a lot of tough situations too. One of the first stories that I worked on was looking at aging prisoners. I went to Tennessee and Alabama. I wonder if I'd even get access now to these facilities because of how things have tightened up in terms of access to prisons in the United States. But we were fascinated by the idea that the fastest growing segment of our prison population then, this was in 1996, were people over 50 years old. And it begs the question, like this gentleman, I don't remember what he did to be in prison, but he had diabetes, he had both his legs amputated. How could he possibly be a threat to society? And does it make sense both on a human rights level and then even just on an economic level to be spending $60,000 a year in taxpayer money to care for him? There are a lot of these sort of questions and issues that we were trying to explore and better understand and then convey to the public. This was another innovative program in San Francisco. The sheriff's department realized that on eviction day, which was every Wednesday, sometimes they would go to a home or an apartment, and there was an elder in it. And the only job of those deputies that day was to vacate it, the place, and put new locks on it. Well, what happens when there's, in this case, an 82-year-old Lebanese man who does not speak English, did not know that his son had not paid rent for a year, and the day that the sheriffs show up, what's this man supposed to do? Well, before this program was started, he would have ended up on the streets. But what the San Francisco sheriff, it was Mike Hennessy, then realized, so what he did was he instituted a social worker, that's the woman in the background, who would come with the sheriff's deputies when they knew that there was an elder on the property, so that then her job was to help him land in a decent position as opposed to on the street. Gambling is another big problem among our elders. So as you can see, we really did a very wide gamut, a real cross section of issues from caregiving to, I photographed 4 death scenes in the course of this project. The sort of, I think one of the main thrusts behind this was, we have the gift of longevity. Roughly 30 years more have been tacked on in the last, let's say, 30, 40, 50 years onto our lifespans. What do we do with that extra time? Sure, there'll be people who run in the Olympics and skydive, but millions of people will be basically stuck living longer with certain problems. One of the most beautiful stories that we encountered was this, and this was in rural West Virginia. Arden Peters on the left, who was 90, and Warren on the right, who was 76. They befriended each other in a Walmart, and then the younger man, Warren, ended up moving in with Arden and his wife, who was also 90. And this is her death scene, and Warren ended up taking care of them. It was really one of the most amazing stories I think I've ever worked on, quite frankly. Just so touching, and to see this sort of level of care and just camaraderie. And then, after working for about 8 years on this, when this is Herbie, my father-in-law, my wife's dad, we were living in San Francisco, he was in New Jersey, and we realized he could not live alone anymore. He was suffering from dementia and Lewy body's disease, a form of Parkinson's. And so we moved back. That's why we're in New Jersey now. This was 16 years ago, to take care of him. We moved him into our home, and he spent the last 2 years of his life living with us, and eventually he died in our home with us around him. So, I always say Julie didn't need to do the aging project to become a better human being, but I certainly did. And with all that I saw and all I learned and witnessed in those 7 or 8 years of doing field work, made me realize that when it was time to take care of one of our parents, and Herbie was actually the last surviving parent between us, that we would not warehouse him in a facility, that we would care for him, because that was the right thing to do, because I would not have the life I have without him. And you know, it was a very difficult, you know, it was a very challenging time. You know, a lot of stress for, as you can imagine, on Julie, who was juggling. You know, this was this project about the sandwich generation. You know, a middle-aged couple that was caring for an elder, but also caring for young kids. And it was my first time turning my camera or photographing in my home. Well, the first time any kind of really significant work. And I also learned so much doing that. I think it has made me a more empathetic photographer, a more empathetic storyteller, because now I know what it feels like when the camera is pointed at you. I know there were times where I felt it was very intrusive. So now I hope I have more sensitivity when I'm photographing people to understand how they may be reacting to my presence, to my camera. All right, so now we turn to the moment. So the rest of this work I'm going to show is really all work that I've created in the last 3 months, since the first or second week in March, when, as I said, I returned from the field and I realized I was not going to be able to travel anywhere. As I said, I'm normally gone 8 months out of the year. I'm rarely home more than a week or two at any stretch. And so I immediately decided to start volunteering at a local food kitchen here in my town, and then also to start to maintain a visual diary, you know, COVID diary. I'm one of millions of people around the world who has ended up doing that. You know, in March and April, they were very tough times here. You know, people were dying and getting sick and right around us, and neighbors died. Some close people to us passed. And I was, you know, waking up very early in the morning. You know, these are the train tracks to New York City. It's 12 miles away, but man, it, especially then, felt like a universe away. But Julie, my wife, is incredible. There was a moment about 2 weeks into this where she turned to me and she said, "I was made for this." And she just is, you know, doing yoga and, you know, sewing masks for the neighbors and me, you know, knitting and tending to her garden, and just, you know, she's amazing. As plus running a nonprofit and as a filmmaker and producer. This was in a neighbor's yard. I don't know where this started. For the last year or two, he always puts up this teddy bear, but then once the pandemic hit, he would put these different signs on it. This is one of our Amazon delivery people. So the way I dealt with the fact that I could not travel was I decided, okay, what can I do? You know, for me, one of the reasons I love doing this work is because I want to be engaged with the world. I want to be engaged with issues that are important and that I am interested in or I care about. Well, you know, this issue was front and center all around me, the issue of the pandemic, of the COVID virus. So again, I initially started to just do these random images that, you know, I sort of constituted a diary. Also in 7photo in my agency, we were creating cumulative diaries. You know, we have, with including our mentor program, more than 30 photographers spread out around the world. So we were sort of encouraging everybody, including the mentees, to not just the full members, to sort of document their lives and then put that all together in different packages. There's Julie doing a yoga class. I'm sure many of you have experienced doing, you know, Zoom yoga. It's our cat doing yoga with her. We have a chicken, you know, she's incredible. I scored, right? The old adage of marry up. I think without knowing it, I ended up doing that. This is Allison Nordstrom, an amazing curator. She used to be the curator of the George Eastman House and a dear friend and collaborator. And we were having we were FaceTiming, and I don't know, I just decided to do this set of pictures. There was something about this that really struck me with her expressions and the whole feeling of these images. You know, it was a very weird winter into spring. I don't know for you guys, wherever you are, what it was like, but one thing I've noticed here on the East Coast is we don't seem to have spring anymore. In the last decade, we have a prolonged winter, and a cold sort of spring, and then all of a sudden it's summer. So this is the Tony's Kitchen in Montclair, it's a town of about 40,000 people. This is where I was volunteering, doing, sort of packing food. And it was just at a time, and I continue to do that. I try once a week to volunteer there. I realized early on, if I was going to have all this extra time that I normally don't have, how can I use it in a productive way? How can I give back? Because normally I don't have the time or the energy to do that. And what happened was that volunteering led me to the project that I'm about to share with you after I finish with the diaries. Okay, she said I could show this, but anyway. And this is my studio manager, Brenda, and she usually comes in 5 days a week, and I think I've only seen her 2 or 3 times in the last 3 months, which has been heartbreaking because I love Brenda, but there was one time where she needed to drop a hard drive off. This was the closest that we got to each other. So this must have been sometime in late April, I think. Our neighbor across the street died from COVID. He was in his early 60s. My daughter went to school with his daughter, and it was a very moving. It was a Sunday. We were all told that at noon, his widow would emerge from the house to go, to bury him. This was again at a time where you couldn't have people, public burials. And about 30 or 40 of us came out with candles and basically held a vigil for her. And it was pretty gut-wrenching, quite frankly, and also brought home, how close this was to us. But then 2 days later, in the exact same spot on Earth, this happened. This was our neighbor's 4-year-old birthday, and he happened to be a Star Wars fanatic. And somehow his parents found a 6'7" Darth Vader to come and entertain the party. So I love this sort of 1-2, this sort of diptych to, sort of cycle of life stuff, right? And I was just making these pictures. I'd be home, it's late afternoon, and, and it's not that I had nothing to do, but it was like kind of like I was, sort of shackled to my house. So I was just making images that I would normally never make, but I just was sort of pushing myself to see and to look and to respond. But I was also going out almost every day, and I've continued to do that to this day, to photograph. And so I decided, this is at Tony's Kitchen, that I would do a story. I'd develop a project looking at, I called it Rising to the Call, looking at volunteerism and the great deeds that both individuals and organizations in the state of New Jersey were doing to basically in reaction to the pandemic. And so this is an example of where, not getting paid to do this, no one's assigning me, I am having a kind of organic reaction, if you like, to this is what's around me, what can I do? Aha, I know what I can do. I'm going to sort of try to tell a story that has a little more hope. So this is Jamel Dobbins. He's originally from North Carolina. He was one of the volunteers at the food kitchen. I followed him for a couple of weeks. And then with Brenda, we did all this research and outreach, and we found all these different programs, organizations, or individuals. So there's this app called Umbrella. And what it does is it matches individuals with homebound people, mostly elders, who are afraid to go shopping. And basically, these folks would be shoppers for these couples. This is Nicola Watson. She's a yoga instructor in town. And then this is the Meadow YMC. Sorry, it is getting late. YMCA in the Meadowlands in New Jersey, where they had almost like a military-like scale food distribution program. At this point, I think this was 2 months ago, they had served 40,000 meals. There was literally a 1 mile long line of cars, in some cases two abreast, waiting to get food. They start lining up at 7 in the morning, and the food wouldn't even begin to be distributed till 11 o'clock. I covered blood drives that the Red Cross was putting on. There's a daycare center for first responders and frontline workers. So this is the YMCA. They basically for free took care of the children of people who had to go to work. This is a doctor doing telemedicine. And so he decided he would do a green screen in his home office so that when people saw him, when patients saw him, he had like his plaques as though he was in his office behind him. This was at Rowan University in central New Jersey. These are all graduating senior mechanical engineering students and their professor. They decided they would put their efforts into building protective shields for hospitals in the area. America is an amazing place. There's so many good people who do so many good things, guys. Please don't forget that. And then I hung out with the EMS workers, volunteer EMS workers. This is in the town of Nutley, adjacent to my town. Think about that. To be a volunteer EMS worker, even in the best of circumstances, is pretty incredible. But to do it during a pandemic, really, really beyond the call. We found out, so, you know, most of you probably have heard of the company Audible that do, talking books. Sorry, my brain is sort of dissipating, so bear with me. Anyway, we found out that they were working with, I think it's a World Kitchen, and basically paying restaurants, in this case in Newark, New Jersey, to make hundreds of meals a day. This is a Cuban restaurant in Newark, and then Audible workers would distribute them to people in need. This is a Palestinian group in a town near me where they were also preparing meals to be handed out to folks in the community. The Bergen County Sheriff's Department decided to disinfect the vehicles of healthcare workers. So all of this, look at this, even though our Governor Murphy has, I feel, shown great leadership for our state, in the absence of any kind of vision or leadership nationally, it is so beautiful to see these individuals, again, and these organizations rally together, come up with solutions, figure out what can we do? What can we do to help in this moment? This is Eva's Village, the social services organization in the town of Paterson, New Jersey, one of the bigger towns in this area, cities. And again, this is a COVID positive, they have homeless shelters for men, women, rehab, it's a whole social services network. They have 11 buildings in this city. I chronicled a few of the things that they were doing. This is the CEO, Dan. He's handing out meals to homeless folks and people in need. Because normally they would do this meal distribution in their cafeteria, but because of COVID, they had to do it on the streets, even during rain. Urban farmers. So as you can see, I decided, kind of a mini version of Aging in America, but I decided to, instead of going deep into one story, I decided to cast more of like a survey net of many different stories and many different examples of how people were coming together to help. This is in one of the main hospitals in this area, and these are two bariatric nurse doctors, surgeons, bariatric surgeons. So normally they're operating on, I guess, the digestive system. Well, they were out of work because those sorts of elective surgeries were done. But what did they do? They volunteered to work in the ICU unit. And this is a therapist that actually Brenda knew, who was volunteering her time, making phone calls all over the country to people who needed someone to talk to. So eventually, after working for about 2 months on this, I put an edit together. I wrote a short essay with very strong captions. And also one of the other things I did was, with almost everybody I photographed, I would ask them for some inspirational quote, something to take away. And I pitched it to the New York Times, and thankfully the op-ed section published it, I guess, about 2 weeks ago now. So this was a wonderful outcome from a labor of love, where it nowhere near paid for the time I put into it, but that's not the point. The point is it was getting a message out. So then last week, I covered a couple of protest marches after the George Floyd murder. This was in Newark, New Jersey. It was a beautiful march, maybe 2,000 or 3,000 people. And for me, this was the most poignant moment. As a 26-year-old graduate from Rutgers University, to me, this is the symbol. These are the symbols. These are the messages that need to get out, because that's what I saw, which are young people who are doing good and trying to excel in the world, but they're angry and they've had enough. This was a totally peaceful march. And it's been beautiful to see, the majority of the folks coming out are young people, but, people of all ages, all colors, all stripes are coming together in peace. And then a few days later, I got a commission from Vogue magazine, of all places, which I was very thankful for. I think it's the only assignment I've had in 3 months, to cover the protests in New York City. And here are some images from that. And this was literally the first time I had been in New York City in over 2 months. I was born in New York City, so it was kind of weird to feel like I couldn't go there, but it was good to break the ice and go there. And thankfully, as far as I know, I have not gotten COVID. And it was interesting because my editor specifically said he did not want pictures of violence. He wanted images that would send out a positive message about what was going on. And another interesting thing, and I don't recall ever getting this request at a protest rally, was he said, as much as possible, try to avoid showing the identity of the protesters, especially people of color, because it was being come to understood that the police and security forces might be using the work of the media to identify people and then subsequently harass them. So they ran this image, or an image of this scene, and when they ran it, they put a black bar across that woman's face. This is in front of Stonewall Inn, which some of you or many of you may know. This was where really the gay rights movement began. Was it 1967 or 1969, the Stonewall riots, and it really, really, truly ushered in the gay rights movement. All right, well, that's it for pictures, guys. And since I finished this project, I've started a new one about 3 weeks ago, looking at the impact of the pandemic on an immigrant community about an hour south of where I live in New Jersey, Freehold, New Jersey. And I think I have a shoot tomorrow, and I think I'll be, after that, I might be done, and I'll wish me luck. I'm going to start to pitch it to the media and hopefully get that published. But one of the I guess I'll stop sharing my screen. Susan, we good? Everything okay?
Everything's perfect. Thank you.
Okay, good.
Yes, you're great.
Nice.
You're back. Yeah.
Hello, everyone. So yeah, one of the sort of hallmarks, if you like, that might be the right term, but whatever, of my career, my practice has always been, from the beginning, is to come up with my own ideas and certainly pitch them, but also quite often just start them, just do the work. Because if you don't create, nothing will happen. But if you create things, invariably something happens. And it served me well, certainly. And I'm not alone in that approach. Many of the greatest folks in this profession, this is how you achieve something special. Is if we just wait around for assignments, that's a different way of approaching things. So anyway, I'd love to hear questions, and let's have dialogue.
Yeah, well, I thought I would start with just a quick one. I heard you talk this morning because I was on the call about photography as a form of advocacy, but in more particular, this way of learning to care about other things more than yourself, and that relationship building was actually a core skill for your craft. And I wonder if you'd talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's so interesting. When I was in my early 20s and I moved out from New York to San Francisco, and I was like, I should work for Life magazine. I was really full of myself. And then somewhere in my mid 20s, I realized like I was nowhere near mature enough or ready to do that kind of work because I was still too self-absorbed. I don't know, I was young. I was more, I was so focused on taking care of myself and my needs and all that. And I realized at that point that to become a better photographer, I needed to become a better human being. And it probably took another 5 years until I was really almost 30 years old, where I finally was able to do the work I had always dreamed of doing, in-depth, long-form, documentary, journalistic work. And to do that work, you need to gain access to people's lives. You need to gain their trust. And I would say that today, in some ways, it's harder to do that because of the internet and social media. People are, there's still many people who are happy to open their lives to us, but I would say that it's definitely changed, and it's more of a challenge, if you like, to not so much to get access, but often to maintain it. So I don't know if I answered your question, but because it's a very important one, and there's many ways to sort of tackle it or address it. But to do this kind of work, whatever you want to call it, humanistic work, you need to care about people. Most people have very strong bullshit filters, and if you come off as a jerk and or arrogant and or pushy, people are not going to respond positively to you, even if you're working for the New York Times or National Geographic or whatever. That for some people that might be impressive. One thing I've learned through the years, I've been incredibly humbled so many times when I show up somewhere and I'll say I'm working for National Geographic, and they'll look at me and they'll go, "What's that?" And it's so good to get that medicine, because you realize it's not about me. It's not about my career. It's not about my fucking portfolio, right? If I'm asking you to let me into your life, especially in a moment where you are compromised or vulnerable or in need, the last impulse that should be guiding me is my own career, for lack of a better term, and so this is something, it's taken me a long time to learn this, to mature to yet another level to understand. And I think I weigh these projects I take, I weigh the images I make, I weigh the way I approach people, excuse me, very much through the prism of, is this really worthy? Is something good going to come out of this? Mm-hmm. Not just, oh, this is going to make a great photograph. That I really am more than ever inspired, empowered, and guided by that principle.
Mm-hmm. And we talked a little bit about before the talk about how the rules around engagement are really changing the more we understand consent and the multi-layered ways that consent can be given, and wondered if you had a little bit more to say about working with vulnerable populations, and has that changed for you over the years?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, a great question, and super important element of doing this work. And it's part of a whole host of new conversations that we're having in the media in general, and particularly in the photojournalism, photo documentary world. So informed consent, what does that actually mean, right? You can ask someone, do I have permission to photograph you? And they say yes. You can even have someone sign a release form, but that doesn't mean they understand the implications of what they've agreed to. Mm-hmm. And so I personally hate release forms. It's a necessary evil. Certainly there's certain clients and certain certain clients and organizations that I work for where I know I need to get releases. It's just mandatory. It's part of the assignment or the commission. And then there are personal projects where I will sometimes get release forms, but in general, I don't like them. I want to work on a human level, operate on a human level with people. And, but so, one thing that you need to think about is just because someone gives you their permission, you need to think long and hard about what kinds of images are you making? Where do you intend to share them? How do you intend to disseminate them? And might they do harm to the person or the family or the community?
Beautiful.
It's a tough one.
It is a tough one.
You can be the most well-intentioned, good human being and still completely screw this up.
We have a question from Mike Bellamy. He wants to know, do you find it harder to publish solutions-based or uplifting stories than heavier ones?
It's a good question. I've never been asked that. That's a good question. I don't know. I mean, I don't know, because I'll tell you, the Rising of the Call piece I did, I don't normally, in my personal work, I don't normally do something quite so uplifting. So you need to check in with me in a couple of years and see if I continue to do it. Often those more uplifting or solutions-based projects come as commissions to me from NGOs, foundations, nonprofits, and so forth. But I think there's such a big appetite for that kind of storytelling. And if anything, why don't we drive that? Let's not wait to be told what to do. If that's what you want to do, drive that, because people, that's how we sort of foment more hope. We create more, we inspire people to positive action, as opposed to leaving people feeling desperate and hopeless.
Yes. Yeah.
And this is something that I saw with my kids, and I've seen with other people as well, where there's just a point where there's too much bad news out there, and because of the internet and the 24/7 news cycle, there's just too much information. And if all of it subscribes to the traditional approach of if it bleeds, it leads, then it means we're just overwhelmed. How can we emotionally, psychologically absorb that much bad news? It doesn't matter how beautifully it's done, right? I mean, that's the other thing that drives me crazy. Like when I've gone to Perpignan, the photo festival in France, or you look at like world press winners, it's sort of like, it's almost like there's almost like a fetish with violence and death, and it's like it almost seems like a sickness. I don't know. I don't, and I'm sorry if that sounds really judgmental or harsh. But it's a sincere feeling. And, I always think back to like Robert Capa. Robert Capa could make powerful images of war, right? For those of you who know who he is, he could make powerful images of war, but he could also make pictures of, Picasso on the beach, traipsing around with a model, or kids in a ghetto in Berlin laughing. And I feel that something happened somewhere around the 1970s, 80s, and it was almost like a form of cynicism that not invaded, that took over the craft of photojournalism, where it was like, who can get the closest with the widest lens to the worst things happening on Earth and bring those images home for us to see. And again, from a professional point of view, it's not easy to do that, and the people who've done it are incredible. But what is the impact on our viewers? What is the impact on society? And that's the question I ask myself more and more.
And, secondarily, what's the impact on the one being photographed? I work in Rwanda quite a bit, and, we have a term there, which is, tragedy porn or trauma porn, that because we work for NGOs, they're trying to, raise money in the U.S., and part of how they raise money in the U.S. is to show how bad things are. Yep. And that asking people to rehearse their trauma is another way of traumatizing people. And so I've appreciated that very much, that you educate around and talk about informed consent. I think that's just so important. Yeah. So Patricia wants to know, do you approach your projects with a desire to affect change, or do you see your work as more informative or educational? So do you see it as a kind of advocacy, or even as I would even say as a form of activism?
Yeah, It's all of those things for me, quite frankly. Obviously, it depends on the subject. You know, I'm I'm engaged. I'm in, I think, my 7th year now. Excuse me, on a project looking at chronic kidney disease of unknown origins around the world. That is absolutely a project that embodies all of the things you just said. I want my work to be a part of actually changing labor practices in many parts of the world where people are suffering from this pandemic. You know, I want to raise awareness about the issue. Um, you know, it's sort of it runs the gamut of all the things you said. You know, the Rising to the Call project, I think that's more, I don't think it's going to change any laws or any practices, but what a project like that might do is it just at least let people know. And I've gotten a lot of feedback since it came out in the Times to this effect. Let people know that, like, there's some positive things happening, you know, and that you don't have to feel hopeless and scared, and that there are good people out there and there are good organizations, you know, that ultimately we've ended up not having a caring government. And this is not just Trump. I mean, this is before. I mean, he's just the worst iteration of it, in my opinion. But this is a problem we have with um, our federal government. But we have so many caring people. We have so many caring organizations, um, and you know, increasingly, you know, the time I have left and whatever energy I have left, I want to figure out how can I not promote those things, but how can I tell stories around those things that are still, you know, dramatic and emotional, but that lead people to act. You know, in the course of my career, we've done stories, you know, we did where we've raised, you know, $50,000 for a family, or a kid in Nigeria. An image of him that appeared in the Geographic touched a woman in upstate New York, and she found him and paid for him to go to school so he wouldn't have to work in a slaughterhouse. Or my work was part of an Oxfam initiative in 2008 that ended up changing laws in the US Congress about transparency in extractive industries. Again, my work didn't make that happen, but it was a part of the campaign. So, you know, there's many different ways that we can affect change, right?
Yeah. And I was remembering that you were talking this morning, and we've got another question. I'll kind of lead this into that question, but that so many photographers are very like media focused, you know, like what's their audience, and this idea that shifting to broadening the audience so that everybody's not fighting for those sort of 1 or 2 spots, competing for that. And so Nicholas asked, and I think this is in light of the fact that the industry is changing, you know, as an amateur photographer, somebody getting started, you know, how do we pitch pieces to smaller publications, or what does the road look like these days for how people are getting work seen and published?
So, good practical question. I wish I had the magic bullet answer for it. But you know, it's a myriad of ways that we do this, that you can do this. But the bottom line is, you first have to have something to show. All right, especially if one is just getting started, regardless of your age. It's not about age. It's about if you're new to the profession. You know, then you have no currency, you have no standing, right? And you know, sadly, it's just the reality is, if you haven't won awards or had major publications, you know, you don't have, if you don't have a book, it's very hard to get editors. Actually, even if you have all those things, it's still hard to get editors to respond. Just so you know, guys, just so you know that. I cannot tell you how often I get ghosted by major editors of publications, and it fucking pisses me off. But anyway, so that's why I never ghost anybody. But anyway, so you know, I think the way to most effective way to do this is find a project that you can start. You know, in terms of access, you know, the cost of it, all those things. You know, and then once you have enough critical mass, then you have a stronger calling card, right? You have something to show, as opposed to, you know, hey, I'm Ed, I'm a photographer in New Jersey, I have this really great idea I want to work on. It's just not going to go anywhere, you know, unless you have relationships existing relationships with editors and you have a reputation. So again, the way to to get to that point is create work, submit it to contests. As much as I hate to say that, submit it to, you know, competitions, because that's how you get your name out there. And then, unless you just cannot handle social media, and if you can't, I totally understand. No judgment, I totally get it. And you're probably healthier for that mentally. But anyway, social media is also a very effective way. I hear this over and over again from photo editors and art directors that they go to Instagram to find new talent. So the good news is that you don't have to spend $10,000 on a printed portfolio anymore, and go to all the photo meccas around the world to meet photo editors. I mean, it's still a good idea to meet people, but you don't need to do that. When I was getting started, I would do that once or twice a year. I would go to New York, DC, London, Paris, Milan, Hamburg, Madrid, Barcelona, to meet editors. Well, you don't need to do that anymore. And quite frankly, most of those editors actually don't want to see us. So, what I mean? And isn't, no offense, but it just seems to be the way the world has evolved. So, but what you can do, which costs you virtually nothing, is put pictures up on Instagram, and of course, I understand if you have, 100 followers or 300 followers, putting pictures up on Instagram might not seem like it's going to be hard to have an impact, but you have to start somewhere. I hope that helps, and I'd love follow-up questions to force me to drill down or get or provide a better answer.
Bruce has a question, but I'm going to hold Bruce's question because I think it's going to open up a sort of side conversation, and I want to let him ask it in person. But Christine has asked, what would you assign to high school photo students who may be learning virtually in the fall? And she said, by the way, she thinks she was in the first class you taught at ICP in the 90s.
Wow.
And I don't know if, Christine, if you want to unmute or say hi, you're welcome to.
Your face. No.
Went and became a teacher. I was inspired by your teaching.
All right. That's enough. Thank you. Okay. So how do you teach high school students photography virtually? Is that it?
And make it meaningful, because they're mostly not wanting to be photographers. They just heard that it was a useful class to take as a human being. I don't think that's how they say it.
Yeah.
That's my demographic, like kids who need a connection with other kids, and I get that to happen with photography, but virtually it's challenging. I'll stop talking.
Urban, suburban, rural, what's the
Bergen County. Bergen County, New Jersey.
Oh, Bergen County. Oh my gosh. Okay. Hello, neighbor. All right. So that's sort of suburban. It's a good question. One of the things that I've tried to start to do more of is take the lead from them, as opposed to not dictating, but kind of like, dictating what they should do. So maybe you could start by finding out, what are they interested in? Like what issues or what topics are on their minds or on their hearts? What are they concerned about? What are they excited about? What are they worried about? Like what, try to basically have them lead the conversation. So then I think I would assume, unless they're just silent and they don't respond and give you dirty looks, but as long as they respond to that, well, then you have something to work with, and then you can riff off of that, but in terms of, I don't think you're asking about technical things. I think you're talking more about like subject matter, right?
Well, it's a great opportunity for them to photograph their families. But as I remember you saying at the time, like you hated shooting at home. And this is why I came to but you, as you just presented, got over it. Like, and I try to tell them it'll make you a better photographer.
Yeah.
It's really, really hard. It's the hardest thing, I think, to photograph your own family. But
generally the hardest thing to photograph is what you're closest to. Well, I think certainly photographing at home makes a lot of sense. It's interesting. My wife is doing something like this with, she's created a project called Stories from the Pandemic, and she's working with about 8 Newark high school and college kids, and I think they're all either immigrants or people of color anyway. And she's been coaching them through for the last actually 2.5 months, trying to get them to photograph. And one of the young women, she's from Ecuador, I believe. And they're having weekly like weekly group calls, like Zoom calls like this, where she's having each of them present work and talk about what the last week has been. And this one young woman, this is so upsetting. She's so afraid of her father, she doesn't leave her room until everybody else in the house is asleep. And so, the reason I bring that up is that if you were to pursue this approach of, photograph your home life, which I think is a very simple and quite beautiful assignment. And I'll tell you why. You just need to also be prepared that, again, I don't know the demographic group that you're dealing with. But you do also need to take care that it might create, stress for some of these kids to be not forced, but to be expected to document their home lives, because if their home lives are not going well, then while it may be interesting for us to get a glimpse into it, it might be really upsetting or impossible for them to do. Mm-hmm. So that's just one sort of proviso as you approach this. But one of the great things about having them do something as simple as photograph at home is that then you can also teach them the different kinds of images that make up a visual narrative, the detail picture, the environmental portrait, the candid moment, the sense of place.
That's good. Yeah. Because that's mostly what they're allowed to do because they're quarantined. That's the problem.
Exactly. So is that the case in Bergen County?
It's, it's like an epicenter. Like it's a lot of.
It was the epicenter of New Jersey.
Yeah. So they're cooped up, and that kind of is a lot of kids who take in my class over the year. They are trouble at home. Like that is kind of, but I would like, and they end up making work about that often, but not usually shooting at home, like right. They from around, but I don't want to take too much more time.
No, it's okay with me as long as it's okay with everyone else. I think that, no, I think it's quite interesting. It's very interesting to think about these challenges. And also everyone's going to have a different threshold during this pandemic period for exposure, for risk, if you like, right? There's some folks who who are so fearful they're not going to want to leave their house, not because there's any problem in their lives, just that they're so fearful of catching the virus. And then there are others that are more intrepid. So obviously, as you well know, it's not one size fits all in this case. You've got to, but I don't know, that's where I would want to start, is tell me what you're interested in. Mm-hmm. And hopefully you don't get, 20 blank stares.
Yeah, I'm used to rallying them up out of that, but virtually it's tough.
Do you have ideas that you must have some ideas that you were thinking about?
Well, I think they need more fun in the virtual classes. Like I had gathered resources for them. Like these are people who have photographed their family, like these are things, these are people who photograph like objects at home. But they needed fun. Like they needed me live, and saying, everyone go find a can of beans and then come back and say, let's all shoot something with a can of beans, which is how, like in school, I get to the deeper stuff is like, I have to pull them out of their misery first of being in school. Like they're in a deeper misery, a lot of them,
So that's interesting. So first of all, if you can get them to maybe, maybe you do it thematically, like what is fun to you, and what is happening in your life or in your home or in your home that is fun, and document that. But another thing that I just thought of, I remember when I was in, I think, 8th grade, I I was given this assignment by my sister's husband. What would that be? Brother-in-law, where he said, "I want you to write an essay on how you make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich." Now, as you can imagine, as a 12-year-old, I thought he was full of shit. But then when I actually did it, it was like, wow, it's really interesting and it's really tough. So maybe there's some like visual version of that where
Yeah.
that there's something that they might do every day that they don't think about, and now photograph it.
Right. And then
So this is about capturing process.
hmm yeah, that's a good idea. Like those little things, those little challenges, they said, like that's some of the feedback I got. They were
Yeah,
like,
like show us how your mom, dad, brother, sister cooks dinner. Whatever it may be,
yeah,
whatever it may be.
something more specific like that. A detail, your mother's dresser top.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
And then what would be interesting, although I think it's tricky to do this, but maybe if you gave that as a universal assignment to everybody, but you just have to be careful because maybe not everybody has a dad, or not everybody,
Oh,
you just need to make sure that you don't put anyone in a uncomfortable position.
yeah. And that's, I would absolutely be sensitive to that. But,
Yeah.
And Christine, this is Susan. Another thing that I would love to recommend and encourage you to do is that the 6 Feet Project does have a student portion. And sometimes we find that when students know that other students from around the country are also producing work that's being shown or being, and instructors are getting together to create assignments to help inspire. And so we're about to put together a little symposium of photo educators that start to come up with assignments to share them with each other to help. So I'll if you email me, I'll get you on that list.
Okay.
Great. We have a couple of backed up questions. Bruce, did you want to frame that question you had? Was there a specific reason you were asking? And you're on mute right now.
Am I unmuted now?
You're now. I can hear you now.
Iris, hello. Well, yeah, but before I do, I want to thank you for this whole presentation. I've loved the pictures you've shown. They're absolutely, the whole thing was just wonderful. There are a few I want to comment on, if I may. I love the 3 gloves on the ground. I love the guy at the back of the truck wearing gloves but no mask. Your Nutley EMS worker, one of whom was wearing a yarmulke. I mean, that was. I've been working on bad cop stuff all week. We've had real shit here in Buffalo involving some friends. The guy who got knocked was a friend of mine. So,
is he okay?
Yeah. So this is a real delight. I mean, dealing with someone who has a real human approach to human beings. So thank you for all of this. The question I had was, you talked about Robert Capa and Robert Capa's scope. I mean, he and I wondered, and you talked about people who went for blood, death, and despair. And and you cannot answer this question if you don't want to. I mean, of course you won't if you don't want to. But I wondered what you thought of Don McCallum.
Don McCullen, the British photographer.
Yes.
Oh, I would put him in the same category as Capa, as someone who, did in some ways even more gripping, urgent war photography than Capa did. And Capa lived somewhat of a romantic life, and also his life was cut short. But Don McCullen, my God, he took some of the most critical images of the Vietnam War, the Biafran War.
Northern Ireland.
Oh my God, Northern Ireland, Lebanon, it goes on and on. He was amazing. But then, he turned his camera on the British countryside or a coal country, or went to India and made these timeless images of landscapes and so forth. So I guess, I mean, okay, I hate to name names, but like I think in contrast, someone like Jim Noctway, who's absolutely brilliant. I mean, we're not talking about quality here. And, it feels like someone like Jim is more of a product of a more contemporary, not cynical, because I know he cares so deeply about everything he does, and he's brilliant. He's brilliant. But when you look at his work, it's just one like gut punch after another. It's like, it's relentless. Here's I want an anecdote, if I may share, that early on illustrated kind of what we're talking about. So it was 1988. My sister, who's 10 years older than me, had just had a double mastectomy. I was living in San Francisco. She was in New Jersey. And Eugene Richards' book, he's one of my idols, Eugene Richards' book, Exploding into Life, about his wife's battle with breast cancer, had just come out. So I'm talking to my sister, and I'm like, and I'm so excited because whatever, I was in my 20s. I was like this excited kid, someone I admired so much, and this book that was having this impact on me in the way he used Gene uses the visual language, all these things. And I'm going on, I'm explaining what's about. And then she says to me, she goes, "Eddie, did she live?" I burst into tears because I realized, like, she doesn't give a shit about, how masterfully he composes his images or how close he got to this. What she wanted to know would be the most human thing, right? Someone who had just survived this. Did his wife live?
What's it all about, Alfie?
Right. And so, it still took me many years after that to truly absorb that lesson into my own practice as fully as I needed to. But it was an early lesson of kind of realizing that, or another more lighter example would be like, when we started to have kids, and I'd make all these weird pictures of my kids, arms cut off and poles going through their, whatever, and I would send them to Herbie, to, Julie's dad. And he would call her up and he'd go, "Julie, can I just have a picture of the kids smiling?" And it would be like, right, you dumbass. It's like, what are you doing here? So who's your, right? So it gets back to that whole thing of authorship. Who is your audience? What is the impact you want to have? And I think the more we can answer those questions accurately, clearly, fully, the better our work will be, right? And the more righteous it is, really. So as opposed to, how do I mimic, the amazing work of James Noctway? Like when some young photographer says to me, "I want to be a conflict photographer like Jim Noctway," I'm like, really? Like, that's really, you really want to live that life? So anyway, I hope I'm making sense. I'm ranging all over the place, but
and to whom am I speaking?
Yes, right. Well, again, who is your audience?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Great.
Which changes, by the way. I mean, you started this with age, and I was really interested in that because now I'm going to go try to find some older people to photograph because I'm 84, and you got me really interested in this subject.
But wait, I have to ask you, sir. So how, your friend who was knocked over by the police, is he okay?
He's out of critical care. He's still in the hospital. He's conscious, in a great deal of pain when he moves his head, but he's communicating.
I just don't understand. I don't understand what's going on.
The guy who did that short video is also a friend. He's a local reporter who just happened to be on the steps. And that's like that Kappa photograph of that guy getting killed. It's one of those iconic photographs that just went around the world. It's been seen 80 million times now, that footage.
Wow.
So we all know who I'm talking about, right? So it's, but anyhow, he's probably going to be okay. He's a really sweet guy. Donald Trump is totally full of fucking shit on this.
It's unbelievable that he.
Don't get me started. But yeah.
Sorry, folks. Sorry.
No, you're good. You're good. Thank you, Bruce.
I'm done.
I I think you've already answered this, but I just want to make sure I cover Daniel's question. It's more about how you determine what makes an interesting story, and I think I've heard you speak so beautifully about cultivating curiosity and showing up with an open and a passionate heart within your community. So I think this is just another opportunity maybe for you to talk. Let's see, when you're looking for stories to tell closer to home or looking at things that you experience regularly or the familiar, it can sometimes be difficult to see those things as a story. So just speaking to that a little bit.
Yeah, well, I thankfully passed through the period where I had to go to Iraq or Afghanistan or Nigeria to feel like I was doing something meaningful, right? I mean, I'm still hope I can go back to those places, but what I'm again guided, and I think we should all be guided by, is more of an sort of organic, for lack of a better term, like it's like, again, it's like what I said to, I'm sorry, was it Christine, the woman about who's asking about the students, is like, what do you care about? I care about immigration. I care about immigrants. I'm a first generation American. So it was natural for me to think in these weeks, okay, what can I cover? What can I tell a story about? And then, New Jersey is such a diverse state, and we have. So as soon as I heard about, and I actually been to the city of Freehold, excuse me, last year working on a different project, so I was aware of the sort of mostly Latino community there, and so I thought, okay, well, this is a natural. It's perfect. These are people I care about. These are people I actually really respect for all the hard work that they do, and they're often leading exemplary lives, right? They are. It's not bullshit. They are. They're working hard. They're trying to raise their families and, be law-abiding citizens. It's so it's sort of like, okay, and now how does the pandemic affect them? So for me, it was like, that's a given. I'm happy to drive down a few days a week for an hour and spend time with this community and come to learn about them. And that's the other thing. You really need to have this genuine curiosity, this genuine desire to learn about the world, to learn about people, to learn about issues, to learn about places, whatever it is. Even if you're a travel photographer, right? I would assume you're not just doing travel photography because you want to travel. You're doing it because you actually are interested in other places, right? Whether it's the culture or the food or the landscapes or the architecture, right? And this is the beautiful thing about being a photographer, is it gives us a passport and a platform to capture the world, not capture, to show, to document the world and to share it with others. And that simple, what I just said, that's simply perfect. That's all I need. That when I photograph, I feel alive.
Hey, Ed,
Yeah.
I have a question that kind of goes along with that, which was, you mentioned that you began by deciding to volunteer at the food bank in your hometown. Was that decision, did you make that just based on the fact that you had this time and you wanted to go give your time to something else, and then in doing so, did the story kind of unfold, or did you make that choice already knowing that there was the potential story that could come from it?
Yeah. So it's interesting, Juan Diego, in some ways the genesis of that started a long time ago, years ago, because, well, you know me somewhat, we got to meet a bunch of times, but, I don't know what, 3, 4, 5 years ago, I've also had to do a lot of burnout, being on the road for 30 years, 6, 7 days a week, doing this work and absorbing all that I've seen and witnessed. And, there are times where I felt incredibly frustrated with the profession, that after all that I have done, and not just me, many of my colleagues, it's like, it's still this sort of slog. It's still this this slog. And think like, when do I feel most alive? Well, I feel most alive when I'm helping other people,
Mm.
right? Obviously, my kids, that's the most profound example of that. But just whatever, just helping other people, I feel alive. I feel I have like worth on this earth, right? And so a few years ago, I was thinking, actually, started to go back to a therapist, and I was thinking about, like, what else could I do if I stopped being a photographer or a visual storyteller, or filmmaker? And I realized, like, it would have to be something that involved caring for others. So in a way, this has sort of been brewing inside of me. And then when the pandemic hit, it was sort of like, all right, man, you have no excuse now, right?
Mm.
I'm not jetting off somewhere. I don't have an assignment. It's like, go and volunteer now. And
Mm.
that was really the genesis, or the impetus for starting to volunteer. So then once I started to volunteer, it just so happened that this young man, Jamel, who was in the first picture by the truck, or the van, he was taking a yoga class from Brenda, my studio manager, also teaches yoga. And God, I'm surrounded by amazing women. Anyway, and so Brenda and I were talking. This is before she stopped coming in, and she was like, I was thinking, like, what can I do? What can I do? I want to do a story about, like, someone who's volunteering. She was going, I know exactly who that is. You need to reach out to Jamel. So talk about organic, huh?
Right. Right. Yeah.
Wow. How fortunate was that it wasn't a total stranger. It was someone who actually knew someone that I'm super close to. And and from there, it just took off.
Mm.
Which reinforces that whole point of, again, this profession of photojournalism, or whatever you want to call this. So often there's this sort of, not pressure, but there's this, like, idea that you have to go far. You have to go to the other, to do anything meaningful. And there's something quite beautiful about just exploring what is immediately around you. Like, there were years when I was working in all these places abroad, and then I'd come home and it'd be like, San Francisco's so boring, or, like, I was just so jaded about America, or, New Jersey's like, there's nothing here, and now it's like, I can go to Bergen County and be as turned on as going to the Niger Delta in Nigeria, because it's all about your attitude. It's about your attitude, right? I think I've made my point.
Yes. Thank you, Ed. Thank you for that answer.
The next question down, Ellie, are you here, Ellie Perry? It's a complicated question, and sometimes it's just easier if folks will just step in and.
Can you hear me? I unmuted.
Yes. Hey, Ellie.
Corey and I both say hi. And one of my collaborators actually he's on this call too, and he's thanking me for asking this. So one of the high-profile lynchings that's being discussed right now nationally took place in my home community. And
Where's that?
Glenn County, Georgia. So I guess that gives it away.
No, go ahead.
But we, along with two collaborators of mine who are close friends, we're discussing the idea of presenting a multimedia documentary project, sort of moving in a few different directions, but that's detailing the case because it's a very small community, and we really feel called to tell the community's story lest it be told for us. Especially since this is such a sensational story. I am one of the two white collaborators, and our third collaborator is Black. And the idea is effectively that our Black partner is going to speak for his community, because we as white artists do not want to speak for a Black community or present ourselves as doing so. And we, the two white Southerners, want to speak to white supremacy in the South and having grown up in culture, and we think that that there is space and need for art talking about white people reckoning with their whiteness, and that those narratives combine together to really tell what's happened in this place. but we're all amateur documentarians, and I decided to speak up and ask if you had any advice on how to present that story after the previous question about amateur pitching.
After the previous question of what?
About amateur people pitching stories.
Oh, got it. So, when did this lynching happen?
It occurred on February 23rd.
Oh my gosh.
We're talking about Arbery.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Sorry. Okay. Got it. Whew.
So this is a small southern town.
Yeah.
And again, we all have lifelong ties to it and feel very compelled to kind of redirect our collective artistic energies into speaking about this right now.
Yeah.
From the positions that we feel comfortable doing so.
And I guess, obviously to do it, you're going to need access to his family.
Our Black collaborator has that.
Okay.
He's a direct part of that community.
Okay, good.
Again, we're all close friends.
What role will you play? What role will he play in the documentary?
So I'm a musician professionally and an amateur photographer. And my other white collaborative partner is a photographer and filmmaker, and he has some experience with podcasting as well. So I'm obviously called to do some audio documenting around this. And our Black collaborator, who is again a part of the impacted community directly, he would really be speaking to and engaging with the Black community in Glenn County, and trying to tell that story directly, while we, the two white collaborators, intend to do a lot of the labor around this, because we think that that's sort of our role to do, labor of like acquiring documents, of trying to get access to sort of the reported content in the story. And again, to speak from the experience of white Southerners who have grown up indoctrinated in white supremacy and want to dismantle that.
Yeah. So, no, it sounds very worthy of a super important project. So, excuse me, with something like this, you're trying to tell a story about something that happened already,
Sure.
Which is always a bit of a challenge. I mean, it happens, it's done all the time, but just to be aware of that, hold on. Sorry. So it's important that, I guess you need to figure out like, what's your approach going to be? Who are the characters? Who are the characters that you need to, interview? Where are you need to source the archival material? And also, given how much coverage this has gotten and continues to get, because certainly, I mean, at all the rallies, all the protests I've gone to, his Aubrey's name is like right there with George Floyd's. I mean,
absolutely,
they're interchangeable, quite frankly, given that this happened so recently, and then so recently the actual story came out, because I don't even remember hearing about his lynching in February. For me,
yeah, and we don't think that it was widely known or known at all, really, outside of the county. It hadn't really even made news up to Atlanta by and large.
Yeah.
Until the video was leaked. So the event has happened, obviously, but the legal component is just now unfolding, and we want to cover that as well.
Yeah. So how long do you imagine working on this?
As long as it remains as long as the story is unfolding. So I see it as being a long-term project, because this is not going to go away quickly. It will not be resolved quickly.
Yeah. So then what's going to be really critical is to establish these relationships with the key characters, if you like. And I don't mean to talk about it in a cold way like that, but just so we can have a conversation. That's
talking about a narrative, and there's character in the narrative.
And make it also very clear to them that for you guys to succeed at this, they need to be willing. You need their buy-in for the long haul as well. Because great documentaries only work if something happens in the course of the story. and
Sure.
and that there needs to be transition, transformation, something evolving in the plot line. And clearly, with this tragic event, I imagine that's going to happen, as you pointed out, certainly within the legal realm. That's going to happen. I probably would want to try to interview the perpetrators if that was possible. It's three men, right?
Yeah, it's two holding guns and one who helped to corner him.
Yeah.
But they're all neighbors, all in the community, and we don't know them directly, but we know family members and would certainly request to interview them and offer that, I think, is sort of how you phrase it.
Yeah. Well, the idea is that everybody has the story to tell, and that everybody needs to be heard.
Right.
Even if, you might have, overwhelming negative feelings about one of the characters, what I'm trying to say, that you still have to approach them, that they are human and there was in motivation, intention, whatever, something behind this, and also what's the impact on their families and their communities.
Right.
But have you seen 13th?
No.
Every American should see this. Is by Ava DuVernay. It's on Netflix. Actually, we watched it with our 22-year-old daughter last night, and it's like an hour and 40 minutes long. She sat through it all, and she didn't go to bed until 3 a.m. She was writing she was so impacted by it. It's an incredible film, and you cannot, if you have any ounce of humanity and a sense of justice, you can't leave it without feeling the incredible pain that African Americans, and particularly African American men, have had to endure for hundreds of years and continue to endure. So I see this as this Aubrey situation event as part of that. I think you have to watch that film, and it's mostly based on interviews and then incredible archival material and incredible motion graphics. So really instructive. I mean, look, she probably had like a $4 or $5 million budget. So I'm not saying that you're going to watch this to sort of do what she did, but at least to get some ideas and some inspiration on the sort of technical form side of it. But then on the emotional, historic side of it, it's devastating, right? Because essentially, when the 13th Amendment was written, which ended slavery in 1865, they inserted one sentence that basically said something to the effect of, all men should be free unless they have committed a crime. And what it did was it immediately opened up a new form of slavery, where if African American men were on the street gathered, they would be picked up, and then they would be put into slave labor camps, into the prisons.
Right.
Oh yeah, that's what. Yeah.
And that exists up to this fucking moment.
Yeah,
So,
we're talking about criminalizing race.
Yeah, absolutely.
Without a different justification for it.
It's devastating. Every high school student in this country should watch this film. It's like a civic education, and it's so well done. So it's not like a documentary where it's like, when's this going to be over? It's anyway, sorry to divert to that, but
no, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Only because it's fresh, because we saw it last night. But anyway, so again, do your homework, do research, make the inroads to the, and then sort of form, like, you do like a story map, right? Like, who are the key characters?
I've done all that and keep growing. I have it as a living document right now.
Yeah.
Did I mention something?
Yeah.
Okay. I wanted to suggest to Christine, is it, the filmmaker, the documentary film called Two Towns of Jasper by Marco Williams and Whitney Dowd. It was made in maybe 2002, 3. It was at the, it's a very interesting film, because that is the town in which an African-American man was dragged to his death on a dirt road.
Oh, James
And
Boyd in Texas.
yeah,
Yeah.
right. And it's Jasper, Texas, is the town. And Marco's black and Whitney's white. And they made the film so together. And it's what the filmmaker of this film in Georgia might want to see is how they dealt with the issues of the white community and the black community, because they're both in this film, and the roles the two filmmakers take in trying to tell this story. And there is a lot of drama in it, and but it's a terrific documentary. We showed it at the Full Frame Film Festival when it was
Right.
still, I think it was still Double Take at that time.
Yep. Yep.
And it's won a lot of awards. So but it just would be a good example of the kind of thing they're going to try to do with having the black, and if they're going to interview white people as well as black people, just how
Thank
that
you
was
so
done.
much. Yeah, that's a wonderful recommendation. I'm looking for any sort of source material like that. So that's very, very helpful, because again, we want to be very clear with this concept about who we are intending to speak for and who we are not intending to speak for, or not even speaking for, but what our perspectives are.
Right.
And even though we're all from that place, that we two white parties are not going to pretend like we understand being a black person from that place, although we've witnessed it all of our lives.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's a wonderful resource.
Well, I wish you luck with that project, and you know, and you also be careful, you know.
Absolutely. Thank you for taking so much time to give your input. I'm really truly grateful. Thanks for letting me jump on, Susan. And
Of course. This creates a perfect segue, and then I'm going to make a couple of announcements, but then we can keep talking as long as Ed wants to be here, and he may be tired and want to go. I want to just...
Dinner is being made.
Yes,
so
okay. I just want to let the 6 Feet community know that you might be noticing a shift in our programming, and part of it came from this incredibly beautiful feature post that the photographer Ocean Morissette did this week, called Two Pandemics, where he talked about the fact that currently we're living inside of two pandemics, COVID-19 and racism. And so the 6 Feet Photography Project is now expanding our programming, and we're going to be focusing for the next. So before we were all at home, and we made sure that the programming was really emphasizing what it would mean to photograph your most intimate and immediate environment. And now that these are lifting, and particularly in a political time where lots of folks in our community are going to protests, and we're starting to reach out to photographers who are politically active and using their photography as a form of advocacy to help guide us in this time. And so next week we will be featuring the work and have an online artist, Titus Brooke Hagens, will be here, and he will be talking about Instagram, political and visual activism through that space. I have loved Titus's work for many, many years. He addresses issues of marginalized community through his photography. If you haven't seen it, check out his Instagram, but also check out, I think his website is still up. Titus, I think you're still here, so you can correct me if I'm wrong. But mostly we just want people to know that our commitment to supporting photography and image making through COVID-19 has also expanded out in our commitment to anti-racism and anti-oppression work. And we want people to know that this platform is open and available for people to who are being active in dismantling white supremacy and using the platform for that. So if you're photographing in that way or in that realm and need a platform for your work, of course you can submit stuff to us or email us directly. And we really want to hear from you if there are things you're really needing right now in your advocacy work in the world and in your activism in the world. We can often round up donations and support. For film photographers, we just received a giant supply of processing chemistry for black and white that we're distributing to people across the nation who are we're hopefully going to be getting film donations in pretty soon. So please consider us a resource and a support for you as you do this work. And again, we're super excited about folks that are still photographing within the pandemic, but our role here is to be a support and to offer nourishment and care to the photographers in our community. So we're so glad you're here, and we're so thankful to Ed for taking this time and for being so generous. And as always, that's part of what the community has received, so much support and mentorship from you, and we're just grateful.
Well, thank you. You're amazing with all that you're doing. So, and then, just as a closing note, we need community. I mean, Juan Diego, right? Isn't that what we like in the Anderson Ranch thing? It's so clear. People need community. I know it might sound cliche or stupid, but I think often we overlook it. We take it for granted. And it's something I really have come to see within the photographic world, that people are in need of connection. And because it can be a lonely profession and a lonely endeavor. So I appreciate these opportunities. And again, thank you so much. And everybody, please take care and stay safe.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ed.
Yeah.
And we'll feel free to just check out. We're going to hang out here for a minute and just say bye to some folks. But thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Ed?
Yes.
Ed, can I say something?
Of course.
Ed, I want to thank you again. That was absolutely wonderful. And, I've been doing this a long time, and the world really sucks right now. I can't think of any better time to do the kind of work we do.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this is, and looking at your stuff tonight really reminds me of it. You've been all over the world. You're doing stuff close to home. You just showed all kinds of stuff. And I just thought it was absolutely wonderful. And I'm happy to be part of this gang. Susan, I want to thank you for this.
Thank you.
Yes.
All right, folks. Take care. Be well.
Yes.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
I don't know if RB is still here. Are you still here, RB? Or your name is coming up, RB? We had one last question. I hate when we don't get to everyone's question.
Yeah.